The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I was hunched over the kitchen sink, wrestling with a stubborn faucet that had been dripping for weeks, when Kara's voice drifted in from the living room. "I need space, Miles. Space to find myself." I froze, wrench in hand, water droplets echoing in the sudden silence. 22 years of marriage, and it comes down to this: a conversation I'm not even part of, overheard, while fixing yet another thing that's broken in our house. "How much space?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. Kara appeared in the doorway, her designer work clothes still crisp despite the late hour. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that severe bun she'd adopted since her promotion to regional marketing director. Everything about her screamed success, ambition, upward mobility, everything except the guilt flickering in her green eyes. "I don't know. Indefinite space. I need to figure out who I am without all this." She gestured vaguely at our suburban kitchen, at me, at the life we'd built together. I set down the wrench and turned to face her fully. All this meaning our marriage? Meaning the routine, the predictability, the feeling like I'm suffocating in someone else's expectations. Her voice gained strength as she spoke, like she'd rehearsed this. "I'm 43 years old, Miles, and I feel like I've never really lived." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here she was, talking about feeling trapped, while I'd spent the last 5 years quietly building our financial freedom through real estate investments she knew nothing about. Properties bought through the family trust my grandfather had established, managed so discreetly that even our accountant handled them separately. "So what are you proposing?" I asked. "I want to move out. Just temporarily. Get my own place. Experience independence. See what it feels like to make decisions without considering anyone else." I studied her face, looking for signs of the woman I'd married fresh out of college. She'd been different then, spontaneous, laughing, full of dreams about traveling the world together. Now she stood before me like a corporate presentation, all polished surfaces and calculated moves. "Okay," I said simply. She blinked. "Okay? You want unlimited space to find yourself? You've got it. I won't stand in your way." Relief flooded her features, followed quickly by something that might have been disappointment. Had she wanted me to fight for her? To beg? 22 years of marriage, and I still couldn't read her completely. "I'll start looking for a place tomorrow," she said. "Something downtown, close to the office. Just a short-term lease while I figure things out." I nodded and turned back to the sink. The faucet had stopped dripping on its own, as if even it had given up trying to get attention in this house. 3 days later, Kara was scrolling through rental listings on her laptop at the breakfast table, her coffee growing cold as she clicked through photos of sleek downtown apartments. "Look at this one," she said, angling the screen toward me. "Top floor of the Meridian Building. Floor-to-ceiling windows, granite countertops, fitness center in the building." I glanced at the listing. The Meridian Building. I knew it well. I'd been the silent partner in its purchase and renovation 3 years ago. The family trust owned 60% of the building, with 2 other investors holding the remainder. The property manager, Janet Morrison, had been sending me monthly reports on occupancy rates and tenant satisfaction scores. "Looks expensive," I said, buttering my toast. "It's within my budget. Barely, but I can swing it." Kara's salary had nearly doubled with her promotion, and she'd been vocal about her newfound financial independence. "I'm going to see it this afternoon." "Good for you." She looked at me strangely. "You're being very supportive about this." "You said you needed space. I'm giving you space." That afternoon, while Kara toured what would become her temporary sanctuary, I sat in my home office reviewing the trust documents. My grandfather had been a shrewd man, establishing the trust with provisions that gave me complete control over property decisions while maintaining anonymity through layers of legal entities. Even the property management company didn't know my identity. To them, I was just the beneficial owner who communicated through our family attorney. My phone buzzed. A text from Kara. Got it. Moving in next weekend. 1-year lease with option to renew. I'm so excited. I stared at the message for a long moment, then opened my laptop and pulled up the lease template Janet used for all Meridian tenants. Standard terms. 30-day notice required for non-renewal. No automatic renewal clause. I'd insisted on those terms specifically to maintain flexibility for the trust's holdings. I typed back, "Congratulations. I'm happy you found what you were looking for." The moving truck arrived that Saturday morning. Kara had hired professional movers, another symbol of her independence. I helped carry a few boxes, maintaining the facade of the supportive husband, while our daughter Caitlin live-streamed the entire process on TikTok. "My mom is literally having her main character moment," Caitlin announced to her phone. "Finally living her best life without my dad's boring energy holding her back." The comment stung, but I kept loading boxes. At 19, Caitlin had inherited her mother's flair for drama and her generation's assumption that every life change deserved a social media celebration. As the movers loaded the last of Kara's belongings, she approached me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "This doesn't have to be permanent," she said quietly. "I just need to see who I am on my own." "I know," I replied. "Take all the time you need." She kissed my cheek, a brief, almost sisterly gesture, and climbed into her car to follow the moving truck downtown. I stood in our driveway, watching her disappear around the corner, then walked back into our suddenly spacious house. In my office, I opened the calendar on my computer and counted forward 30 days from Kara's move-in date. Her lease would expire exactly 1 month from today, unless she submitted a renewal application, and I approved it. I marked the date with a simple note. Decision Day. 3 weeks into Kara's independence experiment, our neighbor Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door with a casserole and barely concealed curiosity. "How are you holding up, Miles?" she asked, peering past me into the house as if expecting to find evidence of my emotional collapse. "Just fine, thanks. Keeping busy. I saw Kara at the farmer's market last Saturday with a very handsome man. They looked quite comfortable together." I accepted the casserole with a smile. "Kara's making new friends. That's good." Mrs. Patterson's disappointment was palpable. She'd clearly expected more dramatic reaction to fuel the neighborhood gossip mill. That evening, I found myself curious enough to drive past the Meridian Building. Kara's apartment was on the 15th floor, corner unit. The lights were on, and I could see silhouettes moving behind the floor-to-ceiling windows she'd been so excited about. 2 silhouettes. I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, a man emerged from the building's lobby. Tall, well-dressed, driving a BMW that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. He looked like every middle-aged woman's fantasy of what success should look like. I followed him at a distance, my curiosity overriding any sense of propriety. He drove to an upscale wine bar called Vintage, the kind of place that charged $30 for a glass of something you could buy at the grocery store for $15. Through the window, I watched him join a group of similarly polished professionals. They laughed loudly, gestured with expensive watches, and radiated the kind of confidence that comes from never having to check your bank balance before making a purchase. My phone buzzed. A text from Kara. "Having dinner with colleagues. Don't wait up. Oh wait, you don't have to anymore." I drove home and spent the evening researching my wife's new friend. Social media made it easy. Simon Crawford, investment advisor, recently divorced, member of the country club, owner of a consulting firm that seemed to specialize in helping wealthy people become wealthier. His Instagram was a carefully curated collection of luxury experiences: wine tastings in Napa, skiing in Aspen, sailing excursions that cost more than most people's cars. The kind of life Kara had been craving without realizing it. I scrolled through his posts until I found what I was looking for. A photo from 2 weeks ago, tagged at a restaurant I recognized. The timestamp matched perfectly with one of Kara's working late nights. So much for finding herself. She'd simply found someone else, With 1 week remaining on Kara's lease, I received the call I'd been expecting. "Mr. Miles?" Janet Morrison's voice was professionally cheerful. "I'm calling about the Meridian Building Unit 1507. The tenant has submitted a renewal application, but I need your approval before processing it." I was sitting in my home office looking at the calendar where I'd been marking off days, like a prisoner counting down to freedom. "What are the terms she's requesting?" I asked. "Another year, same rent, same conditions. She's been an excellent tenant. No complaints, rent always on time, very quiet." "I see. And the deadline for my decision?" "Well, technically, I need to notify her by tomorrow if we're not renewing. Otherwise, she'll assume it's approved and might not make alternative arrangements." I stared at the red circle I'd drawn around tomorrow's date 30 days ago. Decision day. "I'll get back to you by end of business today," I said. After hanging up, I sat in the silence of my empty house. Upstairs, Kara's closet was still half full of clothes she'd deemed too suburban for her new life. Her vanity still held bottles of perfume she'd abandoned in favor of something more sophisticated. My phone rang. Kara's name on the screen. "Hi," she said, her voice bright with the confidence of someone who assumed they were in control of their own destiny. "I just wanted to let you know I'm renewing my lease. The apartment has been perfect, and I'm really starting to feel like myself again." "That's great," I said. "You sound happy." "I am. Happier than I've been in years. I've been thinking, maybe we should make this separation official. Not divorce necessarily, but a formal separation agreement. I want to keep exploring this independence thing." Through my office window, I could see Mrs. Patterson walking her dog, probably hoping to catch some drama unfolding in my front yard. "Have you thought about what that means practically?" I asked. "I've been researching it. We'd divide assets, establish separate finances, maybe sell the house and split the proceeds. I know it sounds scary, but I think it's the healthy thing to do." Sell the house. The house I'd bought with money from my first property investment. The foundation of everything I'd built while she was climbing corporate ladders and complaining about feeling trapped. "That's a big decision," I said. "I know, but I've been talking to Simon. He's a friend I've made, and he thinks I'm being too cautious. He says I should trust my instincts and stop letting fear hold me back." Simon, investment advisor Simon, who drove a BMW and posted Instagram photos from wine country. Simon, who probably saw my successful, newly independent wife as an excellent addition to his portfolio of experiences. "Well," I said, "you should definitely trust your instincts." "I'm so glad you understand. I was worried you'd be difficult about this." After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone for several minutes. Then I called Janet Morrison back. "Janet, it's Miles. About Unit 1507. I've made my decision." The call came at 2:17 p.m. on a Thursday. Kara's voice was tight with confusion and barely controlled panic. "Miles, something's wrong with my apartment. The property manager says they're not renewing my lease, but that's impossible. I submitted all the paperwork weeks ago. I was at the hardware store, buying new locks for the house. Seemed like the right time for fresh security." "That's strange," I said. "Did you ask why?" "She says the owner declined to renew. But that doesn't make sense. I've been a perfect tenant. I pay on time, I don't have parties, I haven't even hung pictures on the walls. Maybe they want to renovate or sell?" "No, she says they're just not renewing my specific lease. Miles, I need to be out in 30 days. 30 days. Do you know how impossible it is to find a decent apartment in this city with 30 days' notice?" I did know, actually. I'd been tracking the rental market carefully as part of my property investments. Demand was at an all-time high, inventory was low, and prices had increased significantly over the past year. "I'm sure you'll figure something out," I said. "You're resourceful." "I don't understand why you're being so calm about this. I'm your wife, and I'm about to be homeless." "Are you? I thought you were finding yourself." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked finally. Nothing. Just that you wanted independence, and this seems like an independent problem to solve. Fine. I'll figure it out myself, like I do everything else. She hung up before I could respond. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Caitlin. Mom's freaking out about her apartment. She's crying and drinking wine, and Simon's trying to calm her down. This is so dramatic. Good content, though. Simon was there. Of course he was, probably offering comfort and advice, positioning himself as the stable presence in her suddenly unstable world. I poured myself a beer and sat on my back deck, looking out at the garden Kara had abandoned along with everything else. The tomatoes were overripe, the herbs were going to seed, and the flowers she'd planted with such enthusiasm in the spring were drooping from neglect. My phone rang again. This time, it was Janet Morrison. "I hope I'm not overstepping," she said, "but the tenant in 1507 came to see me today. She seemed quite distressed about the non-renewal. She kept asking who the owner was, said she wanted to speak with them directly." "What did you tell her?" "What I always tell tenants, that the ownership structure is confidential and all communication goes through our office." But she was very persistent. She mentioned something about having connections, maybe getting a lawyer involved. A lawyer? She seemed to think there might be some kind of discrimination involved, or that maybe someone had a personal vendetta against her. She asked if I knew whether she had any connection to the owner. I took a long sip of my beer. "And what did you say?" I told her the truth, that I don't know the owner's identity, just that they communicate through a law firm. But, Miles, she seemed really desperate. She mentioned that her marriage was ending, and this apartment was supposed to be her fresh start. "I see. Is there any flexibility on the renewal? She really has been an excellent tenant." I watched a cardinal land on Kara's abandoned bird feeder, peck around for seeds that weren't there, and fly away. "No flexibility," I said. "The decision stands." The confrontation happened at our daughter's college graduation party, which I'd forgotten Kara was planning to attend. She walked into our backyard, in our house, at our daughter's celebration, with Simon in tow, introducing him to relatives and family friends as her partner. I was manning the grill, flipping burgers and making small talk with my brother-in-law, when I heard her voice rise above the crowd. "It's been such a challenging time," she was telling my Aunt Margaret. "Someone is deliberately sabotaging my housing situation. My lawyer thinks it might be harassment, possibly even illegal discrimination." Simon nodded gravely, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. "Kara's been incredibly strong through this ordeal. It takes real courage to rebuild your life when people are trying to tear you down." My brother-in-law, Tom, shot me a look. "Everything okay, Miles?" "Fine," I said, watching Kara work the crowd like she was running for office. "Just family drama." But it wasn't fine. Watching her play the victim while standing in the garden she'd abandoned, in the house she wanted to sell, at a party celebrating the daughter she'd been too busy finding herself to properly support through her final semester, it wasn't fine at all. The breaking point came when I overheard her talking to our old friends, the Hendersons, near the dessert table. "Miles has been surprisingly unsupportive through this whole thing," she was saying. "I think he's having some kind of midlife crisis. He's become so cold and distant." "That doesn't sound like Miles," Janet Henderson said carefully. "People change," Simon interjected smoothly. "Sometimes when one partner grows and evolves, the other partner can become resentful. It's actually quite common in marriages where there's an imbalance of ambition and success." I set down my beer and walked over to join the conversation. "Hi, folks," I said pleasantly. "Great party, isn't it? Kara did such a wonderful job planning it." Kara's cheeks flushed. "I thought you could handle hosting duties while I focused on the details." "Of course. Just like I've been handling everything else while you've been focusing on finding yourself." I smiled at the Hendersons. "Have you met Simon? He's Kara's friend from work, investment advisor. He's been very helpful with her housing situation." The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Simon extended his hand with practiced confidence. Simon Crawford, pleasure to meet you. Miles Peterson, I own this house. I shook his hand perhaps a bit too firmly. Tell me, Simon, in your professional opinion, what's the real estate market like right now for someone looking for a luxury rental on short notice? Challenging, he admitted. But Kara's a resourceful woman. She'll land on her feet. I'm sure she will. She's very good at adapting to new situations. I looked directly at Kara. Speaking of which, have you had any luck finding out who owns your building? I know you were curious about that. Her eyes narrowed. Not yet, but I will. I'm sure you will, I repeated. You're very thorough when you put your mind to something. The revelation came exactly as I'd planned it. Through Janet Morrison's carefully worded phone call on a Monday morning, 1 week before Kara's move-out deadline. Mrs. Peterson, this is Janet Morrison from Meridian Property Management. I'm calling because there seems to be some confusion about your lease non-renewal. You mentioned wanting to speak with the property owner directly. I could hear Kara's sharp intake of breath through the phone from across the house. She'd answered on speaker while making coffee, probably expecting a call back from one of the dozen apartments she'd applied to over the weekend. Yes, I'd very much like to speak with them. This whole situation is completely unreasonable. Well, I've been authorized to provide you with the contact information for the ownership entity. You'll want to reach out to Peterson Family Trust, care of Morrison, Klein and Associates. The silence that followed was deafening. I could picture Kara standing frozen in our kitchen, her former kitchen, as the pieces clicked into place. Peterson Family Trust? Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes, ma'am. They've managed the property through our firm since the building was acquired. Would you like me to provide the attorney's direct number? No, Kara said slowly. I think I know how to reach them. The line went dead. 30 seconds later, I heard her car start in the driveway. She was back within the hour, storming through the front door like a hurricane making landfall. You bastard, she said, her voice shaking with fury. You own my building. I looked up from my newspaper calmly. I own a lot of buildings. How long? How long have you owned it? The trust acquired it about 3 years ago. Good investment property, great location, solid rental income, appreciating value. 3 years. She sank into the chair across from me, her face pale. You've owned it for 3 years. The trust has owned it for 3 years. I just manage the trust's interests. Don't give me that legal bullshit, Miles. You let me sign a lease on a property you control. You've been playing games with me this entire time. I folded my newspaper and set it aside. I've been giving you exactly what you asked for. Space to find yourself. By manipulating my living situation, by controlling where I live, by honoring the terms of a legal lease agreement. You signed a 1-year lease with no automatic renewal clause. The lease expired. The property owner chose not to renew. It's all perfectly legal and above board. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. This is sick, Miles. This is manipulative and cruel and... This is business, I interrupted. You wanted to experience independence, make decisions without considering anyone else, see what it felt like to be completely autonomous. Well, this is what independence looks like. Sometimes other people make decisions that affect your life, and you have to deal with the consequences. Other people? You're my husband. Am I? Because 3 weeks ago you told me you wanted a formal separation. You wanted to divide assets and sell this house and move on with your life. You wanted to stop being my wife and start being your own woman. I stood up and walked to the window. Congratulations. You're getting exactly what you wanted. I have nowhere to go, Miles. Do you understand that? I've applied to 15 apartments, and the ones I can afford are either already rented or in terrible neighborhoods. The nice ones want first month, last month, and security deposit up front. That's more cash than I have available. What about Simon? I'm sure a successful investment advisor could help you figure something out. Her face crumpled. Simon and I... It's complicated. Ah. I turned back to face her. Let me guess. Simon's very supportive when you're the successful, independent woman with the downtown apartment and the executive salary, but Simon's less enthusiastic about helping you move boxes into a studio apartment across town. The tears started then, angry and frustrated and utterly defeated. You planned this, she whispered. You planned all of it. I planned nothing. I simply didn't prevent the natural consequences of your choices from occurring. I sat back down across from her. You wanted to see who you were without me, without this house, without the life we built together. Now you know. Moving day arrived with brutal efficiency. I'd hired the same moving company Kara had used when she'd moved into the Meridian Building, partly out of irony and partly because they were genuinely good at their job. Kara had found a studio apartment in a converted warehouse district 20 minutes outside the city. The rent was half what she'd been paying, the neighborhood was transitional, real estate speak for improving but still sketchy, and the building had no amenities beyond working plumbing and sporadic heat. I offered to help with the move. She declined. I offered to loan her money for a security deposit on something better. She declined. I offered to let her stay in our house while she looked for alternatives. She declined that too, with language that would have made a sailor blush. So I sat on my front porch and watched the moving truck load up the remnants of her independence experiment. The designer furniture that had looked so sophisticated in her downtown apartment looked shabby and oversized for a studio. The artwork she'd bought to express her authentic self was going into storage because there wasn't wall space. Simon was nowhere to be seen. Caitlin, however, was documenting everything for social media with the dedication of a war correspondent. This is literally the most dramatic thing that's ever happened in our family, she announced to her phone. My dad is savage, like ice-cold savage. I'm kind of impressed but also terrified. Mrs. Patterson appeared at my elbow like a materialized gossip fairy. I heard through the grapevine that Kara's moving to Riverside District, she said, not bothering to hide her excitement. That's quite a change from downtown. Change is good, I said mildly. Kara's very adaptable. And that man she was seeing? The one with the fancy car? Simon? I believe he's exploring other opportunities. Mrs. Patterson's smile was predatory. I see. The moving truck pulled away at 3:47 p.m., followed by Kara's car loaded with the last of her personal items. She didn't look back at the house, didn't wave goodbye, didn't acknowledge my presence on the porch, but she did stop at the end of the driveway. For almost 5 minutes she sat there in her car while I sat on my porch, both of us probably thinking about the 22 years that had led to this moment. Then she drove away, and I went inside to start dinner for one. My phone buzzed an hour later. A text from Kara. I hope you're happy. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I hope you find what you're looking for. She never replied. 6 months later, I was having coffee with my attorney, David Morrison, Janet's husband, as it turned out, small world, reviewing the trust's quarterly performance reports. The Meridian Building is doing exceptionally well, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Occupancy is at 98%, and you've got a waiting list for units. That corner unit on 15 has been particularly popular. Good to hear. 3 applications for that specific unit this week alone, all qualified tenants, all willing to pay above asking rent. He paused. One of them was your wife. I looked up from the reports. Ex-wife, technically. The divorce was finalized last month. Right. Well, she applied under her maiden name, but the background check flagged the connection. Want me to process it? I thought about it. Kara had moved twice since leaving the Meridian Building, each time to a smaller, cheaper place, as her savings dwindled and her credit took hits from broken leases and security deposit disputes. Her corporate job had ended in a round of layoffs, and her new position paid significantly less. Meanwhile, Simon had moved on to a younger, more financially stable companion. a detail I knew only because Caitlin had gleefully reported it after spotting them at a restaurant. "No," I said finally. "I don't think that unit would be a good fit for her." David nodded and made a note in the file. "Anything else?" "Actually, yes. I want to put the house on the market." "Your house? The family home?" "It's too big for one person, and I've been thinking about Downing, maybe something downtown, a nice apartment with modern amenities and a good view." He grinned. "I know just the building." 3 weeks later, I signed a lease for Unit 1507 at the Meridian Building. Same corner apartment, same floor-to-ceiling windows, same granite countertops that had once made Kara feel so sophisticated and independent. The rent was higher now. Market rates had continued to climb. But as the building's owner, I was essentially paying myself. The irony was not lost on me. I moved in on a Saturday morning, hiring the same moving company that had handled both of Kara's relocations. Professional continuity seemed important. From my new living room, I had a perfect view of the city skyline and the neighborhood where Kara now lived in a converted efficiency apartment above a dry cleaner. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if she ever looked toward downtown and thought about the life she'd tried to build here. But mostly, I just enjoyed the view. My phone rang as I was unpacking the last box. Caitlin's name on the screen. "Dad, this is literally insane," she said without preamble. "You moved into Mom's old apartment? That's either the most romantic gesture ever or the most petty revenge plot in history." "It's a nice apartment," I said. "Good investment." "You're terrifying. I love it, but you're terrifying." After she hung up, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the evening darkness. Somewhere out there, Kara was probably getting ready for another night in her efficiency apartment, maybe wondering how her search for independence had led her to a smaller, lonelier life than the one she'd left behind. I poured myself a glass of wine, a nice bottle from the collection I'd started building since moving in, and raised it in a toast to the empty apartment. "To finding yourself," I said aloud, and took a sip. The wine was excellent. The view was spectacular. The silence was perfect. Kara had been right about one thing. Independence felt pretty good,